She stumbled down the dust road, barefoot, her ankle swollen, blood dried on her chin. Her cotton dress hung in tatters. The sun was nearly down, shadows long like reaching arms. A man on a porch looked up from his whittling. He did not ask who she was. He did not ask what had been done to her. He just rose slow, set out a glass of water, and said, "You do not have to talk. But you are safe now. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below." They named me Maybelle after my mama, though I never grew to carry her softness. She was gentle in ways this world does not let you keep. She died birthing my younger brother, and the men in my family, father and 3 brothers, soured like milk left too long in the sun after that. I was 10 when the bruises started. Not just hands, but words, sharp ones that left cuts you could not show a doctor. "You are a burden," my father said once, dragging me by the wrist across the dirt yard. "Only good for cooking and keeping quiet." We lived on a piece of land so dry the grass gave up trying. The house had no curtains, no softness. Just boots, dust, and silence you dared not break unless you wanted the back of someone's hand. At 14, I took to sleeping in the loft above the goats. I liked the smell of hay better than whiskey. My brothers got meaner as they got bigger. And every year, my hope shrank like cloth in a boiling pot, tight and useless. I had one friend. A mare named Ginger. She was old and lame, but she listened. I used to lean into her side and whisper dreams I never told a soul. "One day, I will have a place where no one yells," I would say. "Where the door is mine to close or open. Where quiet means peace, not fear." My father once caught me talking to her and said, "Ain't no man ever gonna want a girl who talks to animals like she is one." He laughed like he said something clever, then threw a bottle at the barn wall. When I turned 16, they stopped pretending I was a child. My oldest brother tried to drag me behind the shed one night. I bit his arm clean through the skin. I still remember the taste of copper and dust in my mouth. I ran barefoot down the road until morning, then came back because I had nowhere else to go. That is how it was. Run. Return. Swallow it down. Until the night something inside me refused. It was late July. The kind of heat that makes the air hum. I had just turned 19. One of my brothers had been drinking hard, and my father had lost money gambling. The firewood was low, tempers high. Mama's old picture frame had been shattered against the wall the night before. I was in the kitchen, kneading bread, when I heard footsteps. Angry ones. Coming fast. I did not wait. I grabbed the butcher knife, not to use, just to feel like I had something, and ran. This time I did not look back. I ran for 3 days, hiding during daylight and walking by moonlight. My shoes wore thin the first night, so I left them by the river. Blisters bled through my socks. I begged for scraps at back doors and was chased off like a stray. By the 4th day, I was so weak I laid down beside a fence line and told the sky, "If this is all life's got, take me now." But something kept pushing me up. Hunger. Hope. Or maybe just spite. I was not going to die where they left me. That is how I found the Cormac Ranch. Or maybe it found me. I saw the house first, small but straight. A fence with no breaks. A porch with one rocking chair and a single coat hanging on the peg. Then I saw him. A man sitting still as a statue, hands rough as bark. He looked like someone who had lost more than he ever gained. But his eyes, they did not flick with cruelty. They studied, not judged. When I stepped onto his land, I expected him to shout. Maybe lift his rifle. Instead, he stood, slow and steady, and walked inside. I almost ran. But then he came back out, with a blanket, a tin cup, and a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. "I do not need trouble," he said, voice like gravel under wheels. But you look like you need rest. That porch. That moment. That bread. It was more kindness than I had tasted in years. So I sat. Ate. Wrapped myself in the blanket like it was armor. And when he turned his back and went inside, I knew I had found something rare. Not safety. Not yet. But a man who did not look at me like I was broken glass or stolen property. His name was Elijah Cormack. A rancher widowed young, they said. Kept to himself. Never remarried. Some folks whispered he was strange. Others said he carried grief like others carried guns. I did not care. All I knew was he had not asked me a single question. And that silence, for once, felt kind. The barn became my home. Elijah never said the word, stay, but he did not send me off either. He left folded blankets on the haystack and a lantern near the door. Each morning, there was a biscuit and an apple on the porch rail, always warm, always enough. I swept the barn. Brushed the horses. Fixed what I could with thread and quiet hands. Elijah never asked me to. But I could not just be another weight. The days were dry and long. My body healed quicker than my mind. I flinched at loud noises. Could not sleep unless the horses were near. I still tied my shoes in the dark, out of habit. Elijah worked sunup to sundown, wordless but never cruel. We passed each other like ghosts sometimes, both marked by pasts too heavy for speaking. One evening, I tried to thank him. He looked away and said, "Ain't no need. Just eat what you take, and rest when you can." That was his kindness. Blunt and careful, like a man who had been burned and never forgot the heat. The townsfolk whispered, of course. I saw the way they looked at me when I went in for supplies. Some saw a stray girl taking advantage. Others saw a shameful thing, an unwed woman living on a man's land. I heard one woman say to another near the flour sack, probably just another girl with loose morals and tight skirts. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them the truth, that I was running, not hunting. That I had survived, not sinned. But I just turned and walked out, empty-handed. That night, I scrubbed the floors of the barn until my knuckles bled. I hated how shame could creep in, even when you had done nothing wrong. One morning, I tried to leave. Wrote a note and packed the biscuit he left. Walked 5 miles toward nowhere. But the wind was cruel, and my ankle, still weak, gave way again. I sat down in the dirt, crying in a way I had never allowed before. Not silent tears. Real ones. Ugly and wet and loud. I did not notice the wagon until it stopped in front of me. Elijah looked down from the bench and said, "You left the horse trough open. Chickens got in." That was all. I climbed up beside him, wiped my face, and whispered, "I did not mean to." He handed me a cloth, like it was just another chore to handle. Like a man used to fixing things the world threw away. Back at the ranch, he let me keep the note. Said, "Sometimes it helps to know someone would notice if you were gone." I pinned it to the barn wall. A reminder that running was not the only way to be free. But the struggle never left. There were nights when memories came sharp, voices calling me names, boots stomping down the hallway. I would wake up gasping, nails dug into the straw. One time Elijah heard and opened the barn door. He did not come in. Just said, "Storms pass, Maybelle. Let this one pass." And somehow, it did. That winter was bitter. We lost a calf. The well near dried. Elijah worked till his hands split from cold, and I mended what I could. But through it all, there was something steady. Not joy. Not yet. But steadiness. Like leaning against an old fence, worn, but holding strong. I began to feel something I had never known before, wanted. Not for what I could do or how I could serve. Just, allowed to exist. It was not easy. The weight of old pain clung like frost. Trust was not something you woke up with one morning. It grew slow, like moss on stone. But bit by bit, I started to believe I was more than what had been done to me. I saw it in small things, the way the horses came when I called, the way the pies I baked did not burn, the way Elijah left an extra log by the fire whenever the wind howled. And though the past still followed me like a shadow, for the first time in my life, I did not feel alone in it. It happened slow, like snow melting, not falling. That first true meeting between two people who had been circling something unspoken. Elijah and I had been living under the same sky, but not inside the same story. I was a tenant of silence, he was its landlord. But one evening in early spring, something shifted. The lamb had gotten itself tangled in the wire fence again. I chased it halfway down the pasture before Elijah caught up, ropes in hand. We worked together to free its leg, neither of us speaking until the job was done. The lamb limped off, bleeding, and I sat back hard in the grass. My breath caught from the run, my dress torn at the knee. "You always run toward the trouble," he said, almost like a question. I looked up. "Better than running away from it." He nodded, squinting toward the hills. "I used to think that too." That was the first time he offered a piece of himself, unwrapped. No conditions. No warning. We walked back together, side by side. Not touching. Just letting the wind fill the spaces between our words. Later that night, he came to the barn, not for talk, just to bring a bowl of stew. But instead of setting it down and leaving, he paused. "I used to have a girl who laughed," he said quietly, leaning against the doorframe. "My wife, Mary. Gone now, but she could make anything grow. Flowers, beans, hope." I waited, unsure what he wanted me to say. He looked up. "Then she took sick. I could not stop it. The house got too quiet after." I swallowed hard. My house was never quiet. It just got louder in all the wrong ways. Our eyes met. Two people bound not by romance, but by ruin. I think we both saw it then, not love, not yet, but recognition. A mirror held to the heart. From that night forward, things changed in ways that felt like wind turning direction. He let me take Ginger, the gentlest mare, out past the fence line. I returned her with burrs in her mane and laughter in my throat. He just shook his head and said, "She likes you better than she ever liked me." I started humming while sweeping the porch. He began leaving books on the step, old ones with frayed spines. I read them at night, sounding out words I had never known. He listened from the doorway sometimes, never correcting, just letting me try. There were moments so small they almost slipped by. A second coffee cup set out. A gate already fixed before I got to it. A flannel shirt draped on a rail when the night turned cold. But not all encounters are kind. One morning, we drove into town for grain. The storekeeper, a mean-eyed man named Earl, narrowed his eyes when I walked in. "She yours?" he asked Elijah. Elijah's jaw tensed. "She is Maybelle." "Right," Earl said, looking me over like a cow at auction. "She got a past." Elijah stepped forward, slow but certain. "So do I." We never spoke of it on the way home. But I felt something warm bloom in my chest, just under the ribs. He had not defended me like a possession. He had named me. That night, while the wind knocked on the windows and the lantern flickered low, I stood by the kitchen door and asked softly, "Why do you let me stay?" He looked up from his ledger, eyes steady. "Because leaving broke you once. Staying might mend you." I could not answer. The words sat too big in my throat. So I just nodded and turned away. But the truth settled deep. This man, this quiet rancher, had seen every part of me the world had spit out, and still offered room by the fire. And somehow, that changed everything. Spring rolled in soft and slow, like a lullaby whispered through the cottonwoods. The hills turned green again. Calves were born, and the creek ran clearer than it had in years. But under all that renewal, something more delicate was stirring, between Elijah and me. We never spoke of it outright, but it was there, in the way our silences softened. In the way his eyes lingered a little longer when I laughed, which I did more now. Or how I found myself brushing my hair before chores, just in case he looked up from the fence line. One morning, I made cornbread. Elijah took one bite, looked startled, then said, "Tastes like my mama's." "You trying to ruin me, girl?" I blinked, unsure how to answer. Then he smiled, a real one. Crooked, shy. I had never seen it before. That smile stayed with me the rest of the day like a song. But every step closer to warmth brought an ache too. A fear I could not name. I started second-guessing myself. Was I just reading into things? Making stories in my head to soften a life too long marked by pain? I would catch myself staring at him too long across the table or walking too close when we went to check the fence lines. And then I would pull away, ashamed, unsure, afraid. Because what if he did not feel it? What if all I was to him was a charity case? A wounded bird he kept around out of guilt or habit? Worse still, what if he did feel it, and it broke the fragile peace we had built? One night, I heard him playing the harmonica. It was late, near midnight. The notes were slow, sad, and haunting. I stood at the edge of the porch and listened, my arms wrapped around myself. When he finished, I said, just above a whisper, "That was beautiful." He turned slightly, still in shadow. "Mary used to hum while I played. Said it helped her sleep." I nodded, heart aching. "I am not Mary." "I know," he said. But it came out thick, like he was still figuring out what that meant. The next morning, I avoided him. Threw myself into chores like they were punishment. Every sound, every word felt too loud. I went to town alone for sugar. On the way back, I ran into a young man by the mill, a ranch hand named Thomas. He tipped his hat, smiled too wide, and said, "You Elijah's girl?" "I am nobody's girl," I answered, sharper than I meant. He chuckled. "Could change that if you wanted." I walked away. Fast. That night, I told Elijah about it, mostly to see what he would say. His jaw clenched. "Thomas is all talk," he muttered. I waited, heart pounding, hoping for more. But he just added, "You can go where you want, Maybelle. I do not hold your reins." "I know that," I snapped. "But I still wanted to tell you." He paused. Looked at me for a long moment. "Why?" I opened my mouth. Closed it. Then whispered, "Because it matters what you think." That was the closest I had come to saying it, that I cared. That I wanted him to care. He nodded once, turned away, and said nothing more. That silence stung deeper than anything my father ever shouted. The next day, I rode Ginger out to the bluff. Sat there till the sun dipped low. I cried until my throat burned. Not because of what he said. But because of what he did not. When I returned, the barn was dark. But on the loft bed, folded neatly, was a quilt I had never seen. Soft, blue, and hand-stitched. And next to it, a note in stiff handwriting. "I see you, Maybelle. Even when I ain't brave enough to speak it." That night, I slept under that quilt. And I dreamed, for the first time in years, not of running, but of staying. The quilt stayed with me. Not just the cloth, but what it meant. I folded it each morning, laid it down each night, careful as if it were something sacred. Because it was. A message stitched in silence, "I see you. I care." From that day, the walls between us thinned like frost at dawn. We began talking in gentle spurts, about the cattle, the rains, the coyotes circling the coop. Then one evening, I asked him, softly, what was she like? Mary? He sat quiet a long while, watching the porch light flicker against the night. She was joy, he said. Joy in a world that tried to forget it. Could make a whole room laugh just by walking in. She'd have liked you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Why? She liked wild things. Said they were closer to God than church folk ever were. That night, I sat beside him for the first time. Not across the room. Not behind a wall. Just beside him. We watched the stars together, his shoulder inches from mine, both of us quiet in the way people are when words would only spill over something tender. Days grew longer. Warmer. Softer. He began teaching me things. How to shoot straight, not out of fear but confidence. How to tell when a horse was spooked from coyotes or just restless. How to patch fence without cutting your palm open. I began baking real meals. Breads with rosemary. Stews that stuck to your bones. I even tried a pie, burned the first one, cried over the second, and laughed through the third. He ate it in silence, then said, "Third time's the charm." And I smiled so hard it hurt. He built me a little table beside the barn where I could paint again, something I had not done since I was a girl. I drew wildflowers and painted Ginger's face. I painted the sky just as it looked when the storm passed. One morning, I left a sketch by his workbench, a simple drawing of his hands, rough and scarred, but steady. Underneath I wrote, "The hands that built my shelter." He found it, said nothing. But the next morning, I found a second cup of coffee poured beside mine. The milk was warm. That was his way of saying everything. It was not courtship, not in the way the world defines it. It was two people who had known too much loss, slowly building something gentle in the ruins. But the heart, once opened, begins to feel everything more sharply. One afternoon, while mending the barn door, he winced. Dropped a nail. I rushed over. "What is it?" "Just stiff joints," he muttered, rubbing his hand. I noticed the shake then. A slow tremble in his right hand. Age creeping in, or maybe something deeper. I reached out and held his wrist without thinking. The contact made us both still. "Let me help," I said. He looked down at my hand on his and whispered, "You already are." I did not let go. Not for a long time. That night, he told me something I will never forget. I used to believe love was loud. That it had to come with fire and fury. But now I think, it is the quiet things. The way you tend the garden. The way you say my name like it matters. I felt the air leave my lungs. "It does matter," I whispered. He looked at me then, eyes softer than I had ever seen. "So do you." We did not kiss. We did not touch beyond that small wrist-held moment. But in that stillness, something holy bloomed. Trust. Real trust. Not the kind that asks, but the kind that simply holds. He asked me, one morning after breakfast, "You ever think about staying? For good?" I looked up. "I have not thought about much else." That was all we said. But it was enough. And for the first time, I let myself believe, this might be home. It was early summer when the peace broke. I was hanging laundry near the back fence, humming an old tune Mama used to sing. Elijah had ridden into town for feed. The wind was soft, the sky calm. But peace has a way of slipping through your fingers the moment you start trusting it. I heard hooves first. Then voices, low, angry, familiar. My blood ran cold before I turned. 3 men rode up, all with the same eyes I had tried to forget. My father. My oldest brother, Luke. And behind them, Joe, the one I bit when I was 16. Well, well, my father said, sliding down from his horse. Ain't you a little queen now? Living on a man's land like you belong. I backed toward the house, my hands trembling. You got no right here. Luke laughed. You are still ours, Maybelle. Law never took you. You ran. Which means we got claim. Joe spit near the fence post. You think hiding under some old man's porch makes you clean? I could not speak. My throat tightened, breath shallow. Every bruise I had ever known screamed from under my skin. I wanted to run, but my legs felt nailed to the earth. That is when Elijah rode up. He saw them, saw me, and did not pause. Just climbed off his horse, walked forward slow and steady like a storm was coming, and he was ready to meet it. You're on private land, he said, voice like iron. Leave. My father stepped forward. She's my daughter. She's a grown woman. You do not own her. You think keeping her in a barn makes you noble? Joe sneered. She's trash. Always was. Elijah's eyes burned. I will not say it again. Get off my land. Luke raised his hand like he was about to make a move. Elijah did not flinch. He just looked at me and said, "Go inside." But I did not move. I could not leave him alone. This here's a legal matter, my father said. She ran. That means she belongs to us until the law says different. The sheriff came 2 days later. Said he could not make sense of it all. Said there was no marriage, no adoption, no papers. Said technically, I was still under my father's guardianship until proven otherwise. Elijah stood beside me, fists clenched at his sides. What does she say? He asked. The sheriff looked at me. Do you claim protection under Mr. Cormack's household? I opened my mouth. But the fear, oh, it came roaring back. What if I brought ruin on him? What if they took the ranch? The horses? What if the town turned on us both? I said nothing. And silence is a kind of answer. That night, I packed. Left a note that read. You gave me everything. I will not let them take it. I slipped out before sunrise. Took Ginger, my sketchbook, a jar of beans. Rode hard into the hills, heart-breaking with each mile. I found a hollow in the rocks where I used to gather flowers as a child. Made a fire. Slept in fear. Cried until my throat burned raw. I stayed there for 3 days. Alone. Cold. Empty. I thought about all the words I had wanted to say. About how Elijah had saved me with silence, and how I repaid him with silence of my own. On the 4th day, I nearly turned back. But pride is a cruel thing. It keeps you from what might save you. Then something strange happened. An old woman, wild gray hair, more bone than skin, found me. She was gathering herbs and stumbled onto my camp. She looked me over, said, "You are running from something that wants to love you." I laughed bitter. I am running from men who want to own me. She nodded, unbothered. And one who does not. I stared. He came through here. 3 nights ago. Looking. Asked if anyone had seen a girl with fire in her eyes and sorrow on her back. My chest tightened. He said he wanted to give her a name. Not to change her. But to protect her. I began to shake. The woman placed her hand over mine. Girl, if a man rides through mountain storm to give you a name, you ride back. And so I did. I rode back slow, every hoofbeat louder than the last. My hands trembled around Ginger's reins. I had fled the one place that ever felt like home, left behind a man who had done nothing but offer me shelter, and I did it to protect him. But what if he saw it as betrayal? The ranch came into view just past twilight. The porch light burned soft, like it had every night since the day I arrived. That nearly undid me. I dismounted near the barn and stood still, heart pounding. I did not know if I should knock or turn and ride off again. But then the door opened. Elijah stood there in the lantern light, eyes shadowed, arms crossed. He did not move. "I am sorry," I whispered, voice cracking. "I thought leaving would keep you safe." He said nothing. Just stared. Then stepped aside. I walked in, shoulders hunched, throat raw from shame. Inside, everything looked the same. The fire crackled low, coffee pot warm. But the quiet was different now. Heavy. Unsure. "I read the note," he said finally. "I read it 100 times. I looked at my hands. I was afraid. Not of you. Of what they could do. What they might take." He nodded once. "And what about what you took?" The words hit like a slap. "I did not mean to hurt you." "I know," he said, quieter now. "But it still hurt." I turned away, biting my lip to keep from crying. "You were the only person who ever looked at me without expecting something." "I did expect something, Maybelle." I spun around, startled. "What?" "I expected you to stay." That cracked me wide open. "I thought if I stayed, they would ruin you. The land, your name, your life." He stepped closer. "And what if I said none of those things mattered more than you?" Tears slid down my cheeks. He reached into the drawer and pulled out a folded paper. Handed it to me without a word. It was a legal petition. My name written clear at the top. Petition for guardianship of an adult, under protective care. "You filed this?" I whispered. He nodded. "Drove 2 counties over. Sheriff here would not touch it. Man out in Abilene signed off." I stared at the ink. His signature was strong, deliberate. Not a man guessing. A man deciding. "You tried to give me a name," I said. "No," he replied. "I tried to give you a choice." We stood in silence, the weight of everything settling between us. Then he asked, voice low, "Do you still want to stay?" I nodded, tears falling freely now. "Yes. More than anything." He stepped forward then, not fast, not demanding. Just close enough to take my hand. That is all I needed to know. I slept in the loft again that night. But this time, I laid under the blue quilt, clutching that paper like a prayer. Not because I belonged to someone, but because someone had wanted me to belong. And for the first time in my life, I was not running anymore. It took me 3 days to believe he would not change his mind. Elijah went about his work like always, feeding the horses, mending fences, fixing the wagon wheel that never seemed to stay straight. But every now and then, I would catch him looking at me. Not watching. Just noticing. Like he was making sure I had not vanished again. On the 4th morning, I found something beside the coffee cup he left me, a small silver key. I picked it up, confused. "What is this?" I asked when he came in from the barn. He rubbed his palms together. "Key to the back room. Thought maybe you'd want to sleep somewhere with a door you could lock." I stared at him, my chest tightening. "You gave me your house key?" He shrugged. "It is your house now too." Those words. So simple. So sure. I nearly dropped the cup in my hand. I moved into the room that afternoon. It was plain, just a bed, a rug, a little bookshelf. But the window faced east, and the light in the morning felt like forgiveness. I placed the blue quilt on the bed and opened the window wide that night, just to hear the coyotes in the distance. It sounded like music. Then came the moment that shifted everything. A week later, I found a ledger Elijah had left on the table. I had seen it before: numbers, crop yields, cattle counts. But tucked in the back was a different page. Handwritten. No columns. Just a list. Things Maybelle likes. The smell of cinnamon. Ginger's left side when she is brushing her. Reading out loud, even when she stumbles. Painting the sky after a storm. Laughing when she thinks no one hears. I sat down hard, heart in my throat. He had been paying attention. Not just seeing me, but knowing me. When he walked in later, I was still staring at the page. He paused. Saw what I held. Did not speak. You wrote this, I said. He nodded. Why? He looked down, then up. Because one day, you are gonna forget all the things you are. And I needed to remember for you. I did not mean to cry. But the tears came fast, hot. I covered my face. He stepped forward, slow. Knelt down beside me. Maybelle, he said softly. You do not have to keep proving you deserve to stay. You already do. I lowered my hands. Met his eyes. I do not know how to live without fear yet, I whispered. I do not even know how to trust this. That is all right, he said. We got time. That night, I read aloud from a book he brought me. My voice wavered, stumbled, caught. But he sat in his chair, listening with his eyes closed, like it was the finest music he ever heard. When I finished the chapter, he looked at me and said, You got a way of speaking that makes the world seem gentler. No one ever told me that. Then they were not listening right. That was the night I knew, I had not just found safety. I had found someone who saw every broken part of me and stayed anyway. And maybe, just maybe, I could learn to stay too. The first time I rode into town alone after the petition was filed, I wore my hair down. It was a small thing. But for me, it was everything. I used to keep it tied up, tight, like a rope I could use to hold myself together. But now, with the wind lifting it around my shoulders and Ginger walking calm beneath me, I felt something different, like I was not just passing through the world, but returning to it. The townsfolk still stared. Of course they did. But their stares had softened. Or maybe I had. Mrs. Keller, the dressmaker, nodded as I passed. Old Mr. Finch tipped his hat. Even Earl at the store grunted something like respect when I paid for the sugar and soap. Elijah had written Maybelle Cormick on the petition papers. Not as a wife. But as someone under his protection. A legal name for the girl who had spent too long nameless in the eyes of the world. I was not ashamed of it anymore. Back home, I started doing more than chores. I began asking questions, about crops, about trade, about how to fix the gate latch for good instead of just patching it. Elijah answered every one without condescension. Like I had always been meant to know. He let me speak during trade meetings. Let me lead the decisions about planting new corn rows or mending the water wheel. He said, You got instincts, Maybelle. That is something no one can teach. And slowly, I started believing him. I began writing again too. Just little lines. Phrases that sounded like music in my head. The sky ain't just sky, it is a memory of every morning I thought I would never see. One morning, I caught Elijah reading one of my notebooks. I expected embarrassment. Instead, he looked up and said, You write like someone who survived the fire and still noticed the color of the ash. That same week, I started teaching myself how to paint faces, not just hills or horses. I painted the old woman who found me in the hills. I painted Elijah's hands again. I painted my mother, from memory, with a softness in her eyes that felt like forgiveness. I also started walking into town with baskets of bread and jars of jam I had made. At first, no one bought much. But one Saturday, a woman asked, Did you make this yourself? I nodded. She smiled. Then I will take two. By month's end, I had orders. Elijah built me a little sign. Maybelle's table, goods made with care. I hung it at the front of the porch and nearly cried. One evening, I found Elijah watching me as I organized jars for the next day's delivery. "You are building something here," he said. "So are you." He nodded. "No. I just kept it standing. You are the one making it grow." And in that moment, I saw it, how he had given me the space, but I had filled it with life. He was the soil, but I had become the roots. Later that night, he asked me, "Do you ever miss what you left behind?" I shook my head. That was not home. It was a cage. And this? I looked around, the quiet table, the porch, the soft sound of Ginger in her stall. "This," I said, "feels like freedom." Have you ever felt yourself slowly becoming who you were always meant to be, after years of silence or struggle? Share your story below. By the end of that summer, I was no longer the girl who had limped across Elijah's field, bleeding and barefoot. I woke before the sun. Not because I feared what the day might bring, but because I wanted to meet it head-on. I baked with joy, not just hunger. I painted with purpose. I spoke without flinching. I was not healed, not completely. Some scars do not vanish, they become part of you, like a seam that reminds the fabric it once tore. But I had become someone new, not a survivor, but a woman with roots, with routine, with reach. One day, I heard a knock on the front porch. It was the sheriff. He came hat in hand, nervous as a colt. "Maybelle," he said, eyes not quite meeting mine, "your father passed. Couple towns over. Died in a bar fight." I blinked, the news sitting strangely light in my chest. "I figured you should know," he added. "Your brothers, well, no one has seen them since." I thanked him and stood quiet as his horse disappeared into the trees. That evening, Elijah asked, "Are you all right?" I nodded. I thought I would feel something more. But I think I ran out of grief for that part of my life. He poured 2 cups of coffee, handed one to me, and said, "Then let it rest." So I did. We marked the moment not with mourning, but with music. I sat on the porch and read a page from my notebook, the wind catching my words. Elijah played a soft tune on his harmonica. It felt like a funeral for a ghost, and a birthday for someone finally alive. The next week, the town council invited Elijah to a gathering. He asked me to come. "Me?" I asked. He smiled. "You are the better half of this place now." I wore a blue cotton dress with stitched flowers at the collar, my own work. Folks nodded as we arrived. Some even came up to speak. They asked about my pies. My paintings. The jars of jam I started giving away to the schoolchildren. I saw myself in their eyes, not as a stray girl who once fled home, but as someone steady. Rooted. A part of something. After the gathering, Elijah and I walked home under a sky stretched wide with stars. We said nothing until we reached the porch. He looked at me long, then said, "You know, you could leave now. If you wanted. You are strong enough. Free." I studied him. His jaw, lined with years. His eyes, weathered but kind. "I do not want to leave," I said. "I want to stay. But not because I have to. Because this is mine too." He nodded. That is all I ever hoped for. The next morning, I found a box on the kitchen table. Inside was a wooden sign carved by his hand. It read, "Cormac Homestead, Elijah and Maybelle." Below our names was a simple engraving of a tree, deep roots, wide branches, and one bird sitting safely in the crook. I hung it on the gate myself. And when the wind moved through the grass, it sounded like something holy. Summer drifted into fall, and with it came a kind of calm I had never known. The days grew shorter, the air crisp, and the trees flamed gold and rust. I kept the home, ran the porch stand, and painted in the early light. Elijah worked the land beside me, not ahead, not behind, but beside. We moved like two people who had known storm and finally found still water. Then one afternoon, as I stirred apple butter over the stove, a knock fell on the door. Not the soft kind. I wiped my hands and opened it. Luke. Older now. Thinner. But those eyes still held the same darkness that had once chased me across a dirt yard. "Maybelle," he said. I stepped out onto the porch, shut the door behind me. "You are not welcome here." He raised his hands. "I just want to talk. I have nothing to say." "Then listen," he snapped, then softened. "I do not want trouble. I heard Pa died. Thought maybe you had something, papers, money, land." I stared at him. "You think I came back for an inheritance?" He laughed bitterly. "You always were soft. Even now, living like some ranch queen." I stepped down off the porch. "This land is not yours. It never was. It was Pa's." Elijah filed the title. "It is ours now. Legal and true." Luke's mouth twisted. "You always were good at getting men to give you what you wanted." That burned. Deep. Old. But I stood tall. "I earned everything here with blood, and sweat, and silence. You just took and blamed and left scars behind." He stepped forward, like he might test me. But the door opened behind me. Elijah stood there, rifle slung but unreadied. "You best leave, son." Luke looked between us, then sneered. "You two deserve each other." He spat in the dirt, turned, and walked away. I watched him disappear down the road and felt something strange in my chest, like a chain falling from a wall. I turned back to Elijah. "I thought I would feel afraid." "And do you?" "No," I said. "I feel clean." He nodded once, and that was all. That night, we sat on the porch without speaking, the crickets singing their low hymn. My hand found his, not fast, not bold. Just sure. He held it like it was something precious. And for the first time in my life, I believed it was. Years passed like pages in a book too rich to rush. The ranch held steady through floods and droughts, just like we did. The barn was repainted. The garden doubled in size. The porch got 2 rocking chairs instead of 1, and my sign, Maybelle's Table, hung proudly beneath the rafters. Children came up the path with nickels for peach jam. Women brought quilts to trade. Some stayed for coffee, asking how I got the bread so soft. I always said, "You let it rise. Twice, if it needs to." Some days, I would walk to the bluff above the back field. That same bluff where I once sat crying into the wind, afraid of my own heart. I would look out over the hills and remember the girl I had been. A girl who thought survival was the same thing as living. I kept the quilt Elijah gave me folded at the foot of our bed. I still read aloud in the evenings, and he still played that old harmonica when the sky turned pink. We never married. Folks asked why. Some even whispered. But we did not need papers to prove what was already stitched into the walls, the land, the rhythm of every shared sunrise. We had built a life not from vows, but from constancy. One spring, Elijah's hands started trembling worse. He could no longer lift the buckets. I began tending the herd myself, brushing the horses longer each night to keep from thinking too hard. Then one morning, he stayed in bed. Said the chill was too much. Said his body was tired. So I brought the chair to the porch for him. Wrapped him in the blue quilt. Made him coffee just how he liked it. Day after day, he sat there, smiling as children ran up the path, waving as the horses passed. One evening, as the stars blinked into the sky, he took my hand. "You made something out of nothing," he said. "No," I whispered. "You made space for something to grow." He nodded once. "And look how it bloomed." Elijah passed on a warm day in late May. The lilacs had just started blooming. The hens laid well that morning, and the house smelled of honey bread. He went peacefully. No gasps. No pain. Just a soft exhale, as if the world had finally loosened its grip. I buried him beneath the cottonwood by the bluff. Carved a stone with his name, and below it, these words. He gave peace where pain had grown. And never asked for praise. Every Sunday, I walk up the hill and sit with him. Sometimes I talk. Sometimes I just breathe. But always, I leave something behind, a painted rock, a wildflower, a page from my notebook. And I whisper the words I never got to say aloud. You were my home. Not all love ends with a kiss. Some love is quieter. It shows up in the morning light warming a wooden floor. In the way a man lays out a second cup of coffee. In how he builds a space, then steps back and lets you fill it. Elijah never tried to fix me. He just waited, steady as a post, while I gathered the broken pieces of myself. And in doing so, he taught me that safety is not silence, it is permission. To grow. To stay. To rise again. Maybelle Cormick, once a name no one knew, became someone others turned to. Not because she was perfect. But because she had learned how to live, and not just survive. This story is not about romance the way folks expect. It is about redemption. It is about the kind of kindness that does not demand thanks. The kind of man who protects without ownership. And the kind of woman who dares to bloom in the soil she was never meant to escape. So if you ever wonder whether it is too late to begin again, it is not. If you ever think love has forgotten you, it has not. Sometimes, it just wears different clothes. Sometimes, it looks like a barn. A quilt. A name spoken gently across a porch at dusk. I was never his wife. But he gave me back my life. Speech balloon. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Sparkles, did it remind you of someone who showed you quiet kindness? Sparkles, or a time you found strength in a place no one expected? I would love to hear your story. You are not alone.